Hello, and welcome to Achieving Universal ZTNA and Critical Asset Protection. Today's webinar is sponsored by Zage Security and produced by Actual Tech Media. My name is Scott Becker. I'm from Actual Tech Media, and I'm excited to be moderating this demo-packed presentation. Now, before we get to today's great content, we do have a few housekeeping items that will help you get the most out of this session. First off, we want this to be an informative event for you, so we encourage any questions in the questions box in your webinar control panel. So not only will we have team members responding to questions during the live event, but we'll also have a dedicated Q&A session at the end of the presentation where we'll discuss in greater detail some of the top questions that you have. The Q&A panel is also the place to let us know about any technical issues that you might be experiencing. A browser refresh will fix most audio, video, or slide advancement issues, but if that doesn't work, just let us know there in the Q&A and we'll provide further technical assistance. Now, second, in the handout section of your webinar control panel, you'll find that we're offering several resources. I'd especially like to call your attention to must-haves for modernizing operational technology remote access, key requirements for universal zero trust network access, and a Gartner market guide for ZTNA that recognizes Zage security. So check those out. They'll be up there in that resources tab for the duration of the presentation. If you're interested in any of them, I recommend downloading them earlier rather than later so that you don't forget, when the event ends and then the resources tab is gone. And third, at the end of this webinar event, we will be awarding a $250 Amazon gift card to one lucky registrant. Of course, you must be in attendance during the live event to qualify for the prize. Those official terms and conditions for today's prize drawing can be found in the handouts section. Just scroll to the bottom of the handouts and you'll find the prize terms and conditions link there. Now, finally, one of the best benefits of this event is the opportunity to ask a question of our expert presenter. So to help encourage your questions, we have a special additional prize for you. That's another Amazon gift card, this one for $50 for the best question. After the event is over, we'll look at all the questions that came in, pick out the very best one, and contact that prize winner. Okay, with all that housekeeping out of the way, let's get to today's timely discussion. So it's my pleasure to introduce you to our presenter today. We have Roman Arutchinov, who's co-founder and senior vice president of products for Zage Security. Roman, welcome.
Thank you, Scott. Great to be here. Thank you for having me.
Thanks for being here. I'll get out of your way and let you take it away.
Sounds good. Thank you. So today we'll talk about how to achieve universal zero trust access and critical asset protection at the same time. Basically, how to achieve access and protect your assets. Today's operational enterprises are really facing a number of risks and complexities. Over the last 15 years or so, I've witnessed this myself work in a company called ABB, where we connected many of the systems and applications across the operational environments. In fact, in the last 15 years, there has been a 10x increase in number of automation assets, applications, and the connectivity between them. At the same time, our customers are collaborating more and more closely with their service providers, with their suppliers and partners, as well as having employees in remote locations and all over their operating environment. All of this increase in assets and interconnectivity really increased the attack surface, dramatically increased the attack surface over the last 15 years. At the same time, most of our customers have a variety of different assets, not just applications and machines, but also devices, things like PLCs, RTUs, meters, sensors. There's a great variety of types of controls, security controls these assets provide, and they're distributed across wide areas, sometimes across multiple states and nations. So these inconsistent controls have led to a number of vulnerabilities and complexities in providing true access management. As a result, companies have relied really on tools that they've known to use and deployed more of them. So more firewalls, more PAM solutions, more VPNs, and more VLANs, and things like data diodes. It has become so complex today that it's not uncommon to see thousands of accounts and workstations. We've seen millions of overlapping firewall rules in deployments. Um, as as companies deploy more and more firewalls, um, millions of rules get created, and at times it gets difficult to enable access in the first place. And we've seen situations where companies simply, uh, put in temporarily allow all rule and then forget about it. So this complexity is really slowing down the business and also leading to increase in vulnerabilities. Looking at the common attack vectors today, it's not surprising that most of the attacks actually start with valid account abuse. So where credentials and accounts have been compromised and stolen, and they're used as a way to get into the operation in the first place. Um, in fact, 80% of attacks start out this way. And what happens next is remote access methods like VPNs and some SRA technologies are actually being used as a way to get into the operation in the first place, get into the enterprise in the first place, and then spread laterally, pivot and spread laterally across the organization, attacking various assets. The latest studies show that attackers can penetrate thousands of assets spread laterally across the organization in mere 15 minutes. There's not enough controls in the environment to control that spread and isolate the intrusion. So common challenges for remote access, implementing remote access technologies today really revolve around a few things. One is that most remote access technologies require a use of agents, clients, and require significant changes to the operational environment. So as a result, they simply can't be applied to the heterogeneous nature of the assets that exist in the operational field. So you have many of them are embedded systems, applications, and devices out there that get delivered by manufacturers are actually very sensitive, and it's not easy to install them. Many of them are legacy, so installing agents on them is often impossible. Also, installing clients on partner machines and supplier machines, contractor machines is often very difficult and can take weeks on end if it's possible at all. As a general rule, there's quite a bit of fatigue in the market with agents. Some machines can have dozens of agents, and it becomes complicated, and there's a resistance by users to install additional agents, especially when they don't work for the company. Architectural changes, network architectural changes are difficult to make as well. We've seen customers that have tried to implement segmentation schemes using VLANs and subnets, and the operating factories and facilities are resistant to that. They do not want to change IP addresses, implement new VLAN schemes. So as a result, those projects pretty much die from the start. So the real solution for that is to eliminate the need for these agents, really eliminate the need for clients, and also any network architecture changes. Really speeds up the deployment of zero trust access if these three things can be achieved. Many of the network remote access solutions really only focus on remote access from cloud environments. They do not have capabilities to enforce on-site access. Much of the work actually happens on site as well. And on site access is just as vulnerable to attack, especially in operational environments where assets can be spread across very large territories. And there is really no central point through which access can go through. Some access really happens on site in that facility. Being able to consistently enforce access, whether it's remotely or on site, whether it's coming in through cloud or through the enterprise or within the operational environment, is a key need to really provide true zero trust access. The last point here is really around the reliance on cloud. Today's traditional zero trust network access architectures are all really centralized. They rely on cloud services or centralized services in a hub and spoke fashion. Um, this often leads to complexity and vulnerability as well. Many assets cannot be connected to a cloud system. So as a result, access to them becomes uncontrolled. There's also using a centralized cloud system also creates a single point of attack and single point of failure. Many of the operational environments are not able to adopt such architectures because of that concept. My network connectivity to the cloud goes away. That means I lose my asset protection and I lose my access controls. As a result, an architecture that is much more relevant to operational enterprises is a distributed mesh-based architecture, where controls and enforcement can be provided at any location, whether that's in the cloud, in the enterprise, operational sites, or many of the remote facilities. A distributed architecture ensures that there's no single point of failure or attack, and that every single asset is protected and access to it is controlled. Let's talk about how this can be achieved. It really starts around the concept of identity. And when we talk about identity, it's not just an identity of a user, as we're commonly come to think of it, but also an identity for an application, identity for machine, and also identity for the data itself. It's really determining that identity and creating policies around which other identities a specific asset can interact with. Getting rid of the whole network perimeter concept and going to an identity-based perimeter controlled by a policy enforced anywhere that identity goes or any asset that identity interacts with. That's the key principle for where zero trust access starts. Next, the concept of least privilege with just enough access and just-in-time access, meaning that any specific interaction needs to be controlled just for the duration of time that it's needed, and only for when it's needed, as well as any user interactions needs to be controlled with a concept of least privilege based on the role or attribute, just for the duration of time that attribute needs access and with just enough privilege to do their job. We've common ZTNA architectures allow you to get access into the environment and perhaps can control access down to an individual application or machine. But many of the attacks actually happen through that type of a path, where an attacker goes into the environment and then pivots, as I described earlier, and attacks other assets. So it's critical when you deliver universal zero trust to actually think about that lateral movement as well. Not just user-to-machine interactions, but also machine-to-machine interactions and application-to-machine interactions. Where can that user go once they are in the environment, once they are in an application or machine environment? Can they spread, can they turn around and go to other assets? Being able to control that machine-to-machine and app-to-machine interactions is a critical aspect of any universal zero trust architecture. And last but not least, there's a key concept here is the ability to provide central management with distributed enforcement. This means that policies need to be determined centrally, but enforced anywhere where the interaction happens. If we've determined that an attacker has compromised a credential or an account, that account needs to be suspended or removed, and that needs to be enforced across the whole entire operation, enterprise, and cloud services from a central location. Administered from a central location and enforced everywhere. Similarly, if a credential has been stolen, that credential can be rotated across the whole entire operation, enterprise, and cloud, so it essentially becomes invalid. Let's talk about how zero trust access with asset protection can be deployed in a real operational environment. I'll later on also show a demo of this exact use case, and so you can see it in action. Here you have a typical architecture of our customers where they may be utilizing cloud services. There's an enterprise data center as well. There's a DMZ. In fact, it could be multiple DMZs separating operational environments from the enterprise and cloud environments. And there are multiple operational sites. This could be thousands of sites. If you think of, for example, a pipeline, that pipeline may go across multiple states, into multiple states, and will have thousands of facilities connected over all sorts of different networks. Assets can exist in various locations. So operational assets like PLCs and R2Us will be in those sites, as well as workstations. Then there may also be applications running in the enterprise environment and the cloud as well. That optimize business operations based on the data coming out of the operational environment. Access happens everywhere, right? So access can be remote. Access can also be on site. Access can come in through the cloud as well. And this can be done by employees, contractors, suppliers, and partners. So in order to deliver zero trust access, really all of those interactions need to be controlled. In this case, what you see here deployed is ZH Fabric nodes. They're deployed in various environments in the cloud and the enterprise, DMZ, and operational sites themselves. These Fabric nodes act as authentication and authorization points, where users authenticate through the ZH Fabric portals using their browsers, and these using their managed identities, perhaps with also MFA if it's required. And the Fabric nodes present only the list of assets that these users are allowed to interface with across the various operational sites. The Fabric nodes form a mesh. They connect to each other using tunnels, and they do so from the more trusted areas to the least trusted areas, meaning the more trusted operational environment to the least trusted cloud environment or external environments. Never the other way around. And these tunnels act as access paths, eliminating really the need to manage firewall rules or manage any accounts on any machines or workstations. We've seen customers remove accounts from workstations, close down millions of those firewall rules, and all access is being managed and enforced by Fabric nodes through the tunnels. Greatly simplifies operations and ensures consistency and enforcement anywhere for any type of an interaction. So the other key concept here is that the Universal Zero Trust access with the ZTNA fabric, as we call it, is enforced using a multi-layer architecture, meaning that there's no need to have external connectivity in operational sites that are highly secured or isolated. You can keep that isolation and manage access to it using a multi-hop approach, one layer at a time. So operational sites can continue to be disconnected from the broader internet or broader cloud and require multi-hop approach to manage any transaction to it. This creates a zero trust access utilizing defense in depth principles. This is a key concept to take into account for any critical infrastructure environment that really cares about protecting assets, is that defense in depth and zero trust are much better together. The other key architectural component here is what we call the ZTNA enforcement point. Taking a little bit of a step back, and hitting on this point of heterogeneous nature of assets. With our customers, we see applications, we see machines, and we see assets like PLCs and RTUs. As a result, we had to develop multiple ways to enforce access. Proxy services, where we can terminate and reestablish sessions, proxying access to applications. Account management services and credential management services, where we can inject accounts and rotate credentials on workstations and servers as needed. However, a number of, or in fact, majority of operational assets like PLCs and RTUs, they speak industrial protocols and they don't have credentials. So as a result, we had to develop a filtering method, and that's the ZTNA enforcement point that works in the with the fabric. Think of it as a transparent bump in the wire, layer 2 through layer 7, and it's able to get deployed in front of switches and control access to specific assets based on policy. It also enforces machine-to-machine access and creates a much simplified way to microsegment your operation without a need to change IP addresses or change your VLANs. Moving forward, the other key capability of delivering zero trust is ability to shadow sessions and collaborate with partners. Many times in operational environments, it's with people being remote as they are, with subject matter experts that could be residing in other countries, with OEMs and vendors, ability to troubleshoot and solve a problem remotely becomes a key concept, a key requirement. In order to do that effectively, oftentimes it requires that everybody seeing the same screen and is able to share what they're doing in order to collaborate together on a problem. solution to a problem. Well, this can be a quite nerve-wracking experience for especially critical infrastructure operators. Oftentimes, hitting the wrong button can, cause things to shut down and, factories to stop and energy to stop being delivered. So it's important for them to be able to do what they call over-the-shoulder shadowing while collaborating with their OEMs and subject matter experts around the world. I touched on this a bit as well. The concept of identity-based segmentation applies not just to user-to-machine and user-to-application control, but also to machine-to-machine control. It's important to control, in order to truly deliver zero trust, it's important to control not just the user to application or machine access, but also controlling machine to machine access within that environment. Here you're seeing the ability to dynamically control access from a remote user into an operating environment using a multiple hop approach, where traditionally organizations will try to create segments using VLANs and IP addresses, and it's really hard to enable access between VLANs without introducing lots of ACLs and VLAN changes. With the ZTNA approach, that can be done dynamically, where a user interfacing with a machine can dynamically enable access to an asset in the network from that machine. So user can access a workstation, and from there, when they need to access a specific PLC, that access can be enabled dynamically. No VLAN or IP address changes are required. Similarly with applications, when user needs access to an application, they would get access to a workstation first, and from that workstation, application access can be enabled dynamically. They can also go directly to an application in certain environments, especially if that application resides in the cloud or the enterprise using the ZTNA fabric. However, in many instances, segments need to be created for defense in depth architecture, so we allow that segmentation to be done dynamically from a machine at one layer to an application in another. Similarly, for machine-to-machine access, oftentimes we see VLANs with thousands of assets and controlling access with very little control or no control at all between the assets in that environment. That leads to lateral movement, that leads to compromises of those assets, and just as I talked about, that can be done in minutes once an attacker penetrates an environment. So to deliver really truly zero trust access with asset protection, we need to also control the spread of assets, the spread of the potential malware and potential attack. In order to do that effectively, we need to control which machines can communicate with each other. Doing so with VLANs can be quite complex. With ZTNA, it can be done in seconds. Using our policy manager, we can group assets. We can create policies for which groups can interact with each other, which specific assets can interact with each other. In fact, in common scenarios with thousands of assets, only really a few of them, less than 10, need to really interact with each other. Others are interactions should not really be happening. So this can be achieved dynamically with policy using the ZTNA manager and administered across the whole entire operation without any IP or VLAN changes You can keep those as is. So it's really easy to deploy and operationalize. And before I jump into a demo, I did wanted to show, conclude on the slide. Really, ZTNA eliminates the disjoint access solutions that currently being used in operational environments to provide remote access and and asset protection. So we deliver zero trust remote access, identity-based access management, and zero trust data exchange. We're able to control any interaction, whether it's user to machine, machine to machine, application to machine, and even interactions over data using identity and policy from a central location and enforced across your whole entire operation, enterprise, and cloud environment. With us, we eliminate the complexities that exist in today's organizations and companies. No need for VPNs, PAM solutions, no need for firewall management tools. We eliminate the spread of firewalls altogether and simplify your segmentation schemes. Greatly simplify your segmentation schemes. With that, let's jump into a demo. So I pre-recorded this demo just to avoid any potential technical issues. So as soon as I hit the next slide, it'll start playing, and I will attempt to talk over what's going on. So this is our ZTNA manager, and I have a few sites deployed here, cloud, DMZ, and a couple operational sites in a multi-hop fashion. You could see once you hit on a site, what the ZTNA Fabric does is it starts automatically discovering the assets in those sites. So here it shows that we've discovered a few assets, a PLC, an RTU. It's protected using the ZTNA enforcement point, and there's a node on the site. And we're also protecting a number of assets, a workstation, a camera. You can see a couple PLCs as well, an Emerson PLC here, for example, and various other assets in the environment. So what we do is really define policies for users and devices, groups of users and groups of devices, which groups of users and which groups of devices can access each, can have access. And here you could see a number of the devices that have been already discovered by ZTNA, by the ZTNA Fabric. And here are some of the policies. So let's dive into a specific policy. Let's look at the policy for internal technicians. So we'll focus on this user called Bar. He's an internal technician. He has access to all of these assets, control objects and workstation, the ignition, HTTP-based application. There's some SSH access as well, and also the Emerson Rock and the SCADA pack PLCs, both of them in this case, as well as a camera. Let's look at different policy. This is for external technicians, external vendors. It's really hard to control access to those from those external vendors. We only want them to do a specific thing. So Bruce Wayne here only has access to two assets, a workstation and Emerson Rock, and that's it. There's nothing else he should be able to see, whether coming in remotely or on site. Nothing else he should be able to interface with. So let's dive now into there's the other type of policy I'd like to show you is also a device-to-device policy. So device-to-device policy is really which assets across various sites can interact with each other. So here we have a PA station and a New York station. Think of them as facilities with assets in them, a couple PLCs. And we define a policy that only those assets can interact with each other across those sites. Nothing else within those sites can interact, and those sites can't really interact with anything else. But those two assets can, those four assets. Here's the ZTNA Fabric screen. So users interface with the ZTNA Fabric screen for any access. So let's start with Bar. Bar is logging in with his managed identity now. And once he is in, he sees a list of assets he's allowed to have access to. He's not seeing any other assets in the environment. There could be thousands. He's only seeing the assets he has access to. So can't attack what you can't see, right? And everything else is blocked. We'll log into a workstation in the environment. And here what's happening is an account's being created on that workstation with a unique credential. RDP session is being launched from the node in that environment to that asset and emulated with that in the browser here. So it can't hack. RDP is never exposed. And there's these applications that connect. You could see the Rock application connecting. You could see the Telepace SCADA pack application connecting. This user has access to both applications, and they're connecting to the assets as well per policy. He can also invite others to collaborate on the session. He can transfer files in and out. Everything's being recorded. And he can pass controls to collaborators, whether they can write or read and take it away at any given time. So dynamically escalate their privileges. Let's now log in as a different user. This is a vendor, less trusted. It's Bruce Wayne. Again, logging in with the managed identity. Here you could see an MFA prompt. He's less trusted, so his policy is requiring MFA. So we'll log in, we'll provide the code and jump into here you see a very different picture on the two assets that they're allowed to interface with, and authorization is required before they can interface with those assets. So let's select the time period for which we want access. Now this request, after we put it together, gets routed to the operational admin for that site and through email, but they can also approve that request through the ZTNA manager itself. So we'll jump into the ZTNA manager and take a look at that. Before we do so, I also wanted to show you the recordings, for example. So all the sessions are being recorded and can be looked up for forensics purposes to see what that user did during that session. So you can see this recording here, as well as a full audit log of which user did what to which asset and when. Extremely important. Typically, you don't get this level of information in any operational environment, especially identity-based context. So let's approve the session. This request will get routed back. And we'll jump back to the Fabric screen. So it should be approved by now. We will launch into the same workstation. Again, accounts being created with a unique credential just for that session. So no need to manage workstations or other accounts on them. ZTNA will do that and do so with a cryptographically secure password that only exists for duration of this session. You can see the same applications. The Emerson Rock application is still connecting to the Emerson PLC downstream, but this Telepace application is no longer able to connect to its PLC downstream in the environment. That's because the ZTNA enforcement point is deployed downstream, offering that dynamic identity-based segmentation. So this user's policy does not allow access to the SCADA pack, and therefore the ZTNA enforcement point is blocking that access. And it's done dynamically on the fly based on an identity context. Some other things I like to show you is we're able to transfer files. It's another key operational use case. ZTNA Fabric has a repository for every user and can control where files go based on that user access, as well as scan those files for malware. We can upload files into the ZTNA Fabric, as well as download files from the ZTNA Fabric and apply them to the machines that require. This could be a patch, this could be a program, this could be log files being extracted as well. Any type of data, it's controlled based on user identity, policy, where it can go, and scanned for malware. All right. Well, with that, that's the conclusion of the demo. And Scott, perhaps we can launch into the Q&A.
Yeah, sounds good. And we've got well, first off, really nice job there keeping up with your demo. well done. And it was a great demo, really informative. We do have some questions in from the audience. I've also got a few questions for you myself. So what kind of threats are being faced by the organizations that you're working with? What's driving the need for increasing asset protection as opposed to detection and response, that have been, such prevalent cybersecurity investments for the past several years?
Yeah, so that's a really great question. The most common threat patterns that we see are based on this recipe of stolen credential that's been exposed to the dark web or through a phishing attack. An attacker uses that stolen credential and then takes advantage of an VPN access or exposed RDP protocol, gains access into the asset in an operation, and then starts enumerating and finding other assets, and then spreads across the environment. This is actually, 80% of attacks are happening through this pattern. The other interesting aspect here is that most of our customers have very distributed operations with sites, sometimes in the middle of a desert or middle of nowhere in Texas, and you often have to drive out there to do work. An attacker can do the same, right? They can access those sites by driving out there, gain access to those assets, and then from there, from within, spread across the rest of the assets in the network. So these are the types of attacks that are most common. And detection, by the time you detect these attacks, it's often too late, and the damage has been done. So really focus on preventing these attacks from happening in the first place, and by controlling access and protecting those assets to avoid it. And even if the attack did get in, for it to be able to spread laterally.
Okay, all right. And what's the lowest hanging fruit for asset protection in most organizations? What are some of the first steps that any organization could take to protect their assets and increase their overall security posture?
Yeah, so it's really just the very low hanging fruit is really just the good hygiene stuff, right? So things like get rid of default passwords, get rid of shared accounts, rotate credentials frequently, and then use identity-based access, right? Implement MFA, and then to get even more sophisticated, start controlling machine-to-machine access and controlling that lateral movement as well. It's sort of this is good. These are good hygiene things to do, but at the same time are very difficult to do, especially when you have heterogeneous set of assets and thousands of locations, some interfacing over all sorts of different networks, and owned by multiple groups. So it's a very difficult task to achieve. As a result, we at ZTNA tried to simplify that, right? Creating a fabric that's able to manage all credentials and accounts, that eliminates the need to manage firewalls, and greatly simplifies that, and protects lateral movement as well, all using identity and zero trust concepts.
Okay, all right, excellent. And last question for me before we get to some of these audience questions that are coming in. What are some gotchas or stumbling blocks that you see organizations encounter as they move toward a zero trust strategy? And also what surprise challenges would you warn folks about, and what insights would you provide for being successful in adopting zero trust?
Yeah, so I think it's zero trust is it's really a paradigm. It's really a journey to achieve zero trust. We actually recently done a survey with I think over 200 different CIOs and cybersecurity executives, and where they are in terms of their zero trust journey. So some of the data from that was, interestingly enough, 80% of them have already determined that the detection is not really doing enough for them. So their detection response, they've implemented a lot of it, and they're spending a lot of time trying to make sense of the data, and it's creates what they call a pyramid of pain, where they're looking at millions of logs producing thousands of events to really produce maybe one detected issue,
Right.
real detected issue. So they've moved to preventative approaches, or protecting their operations and protecting their assets by preventing attacks in the first place. And there is where zero trust and access management are more critical, more important. So and over 60% of them are actually have determined that zero trust is the way to address protection and prevent attacks, and have implemented some zero trust in their companies. So that's surprising to me as well. So there's a big move towards it, and people have already implemented a lot of it. And the other interesting finding that we saw is that about half of them have figured out ways to do so without needing to replace or update their assets. So this is a common misconception that in order to deliver zero trust, I need to upgrade my networks. I need to change my assets, change my applications, change my workstations, change my my OT assets, and that is way too costly, and I don't know how to even start that, right? So it's a misconception. With the ZTNA Fabric, for example, you're able to deliver zero trust access and asset protection without needing to install any agents, clients, or do any network changes, right? So you can preserve those assets, keep them in your environment, and just use ZTNA Fabric as an overlay to deliver zero trust.
Excellent. Okay, and we do have a bunch of questions rolling in here from the audience. First one is from Adam. It's a scalability question asking, how does ZTNA's solution scale to accommodate the growing number of devices and users in a network?
Yeah, that's a good question, Adam. So this is a key consideration that we took into account when we designed the fabric itself, right? So, and for that reason, it is a distributed, mesh architecture where you can deploy nodes to achieve horizontal scalability, right? So there is no central point at which everything goes through, which can become a bottleneck. With us, you can deploy distributed mesh across the various sites where the interactions happen, and deploy additional nodes as you need more scale at additional sites. So that becomes, you're naturally solving the scalability problem, because you are moving the processing and then enforcement all the way to the edge, and achieving greater scale by covering uh, every edge with a set of nodes.
Okay, excellent. Another question from Adam: how does ZTNA handle multi-factor authentication, especially for high-value assets?
Yeah, that's great question as well. So, as you know, multi-factor authentication has been required by many of the regulations and guidelines, including NIST as well as TSA, and many of the assets in the environment, don't not natively support MFA, right? You're lucky that they'll support a password, right? So, not to mention MFA. So, as a result, Zage provides multi-factor authentication as an overlay, and we're able to. So the way it works is, as you kind of sign a demo, it was quick, but we're able to support various MFA tools, Microsoft Authenticator, Google Authenticator. I showed built-in um, browser extension that can do MFA. We also have a Zage passwordless app that you can use a biometric. Um, and we've implemented solutions using CAC approaches in the federal space as well. Essentially, you authenticate with the Zage fabric using the MFA, and we have ways to also then, based on how many layers your architecture may have, you can deploy a multi-layer MFA, meaning that you can provide a different MFA authentication at each layer, and all the way down to when you access that asset through the Zage fabric. So we've created a multi MFA solution to integrate with different needs, MFA tools at different layers, while streamlining the access experience through the same browser. And this is done to really similarly to how you may do it on your bank account, where when you first log in, you may need to provide an MFA, but if you transfer a certain amount, you may need to provide another token. And if the amount is greater than a certain dollar amount, they'll actually call you to verify you. So similarly with Zage, you can define a multi-layer MFA scheme where you are asked to re-authenticate yourself with MFA. The greater the criticality of the transaction you're doing, the criticality of the asset you're trying to access.
Okay, excellent. And Adam, thanks for the questions. Next question here comes from Suresh, who's asking, how does the remote access feature from Zage function in the context of domain-based PCs and servers? Is a domain controller mandatory?
The domain controller is not mandatory with Zage. In fact, we've seen environments where um, customers do not want to deploy additional domain controllers, typically creating AD forest type of our implementation can be quite complicated to manage. At the same time, many of the regulation in the space and guidelines in the space actually advocate for having separate AD systems in the IT, and separate from OT, and could be separate at each OT site, right? In fact, we've seen environments when there are 50 different controllers. So Zage can work with those controllers and apply and authenticate against them, authenticate users against them in respective environments. We support multiple controllers at the same time and can create a hierarchy as well. But if there are no domain controllers, the users can be simply defined in Zage, and we can install accounts temporarily on workstations that may be in those environments, whether it's workstations, whether it's servers. We can, or whether they need to access a PLC, we can act as an authentication system in that specific site, with the identities being managed by Zage itself.
Okay. All right. Excellent. We've got a couple of questions here from a video and Paul, just about business value. Paul's asked, are there how does Zage Security measure and demonstrate the benefits of its universal ZTNA solution, such as KPIs for security, compliance, and performance? And Avidya is asking a similar question about business value. I wonder if you can talk to the business value a little bit.
Yeah. So I mean, there's multiple ways to look at that. So productivity was one of them, and oftentimes driving. Oftentimes the operations are highly distributed. So in order to service an equipment in a remote location, you may need to drive hundreds of miles, right? And that is very costly and puts people into dangerous environments, right? So we can avoid thousands of those, as they call, truck rolls into those sites. The other way to do it is when there's operations that are down, productivity is impacted. In fact, in many factories, an hour is $1 million, right? And
Yep.
And when power's out, it's even more. All right, affecting thousands of people, right? So getting the right subject matter experts at that time to get in and solve a solution where they are, oftentimes these people are remotely at that time. They could be in another country. Getting them in to troubleshoot an asset and restore power, restore factory production, saves millions of dollars, right? That's another way to really look at it. But you could also look at it from the security perspective itself. Breaches can take out, like we've seen a Colonial Pipeline attack, can take out production across the whole entire nation, or big part of the nation itself, not only costing money to the company, but also the various customers as well.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
being able to restore that in time and prevent those breaches from happening in the first place is another way to look at it.
Okay. All right. Excellent. Well, Roman, it looks like we're almost up on time, but maybe you could talk a little bit about some of the resources on this slide here for people who are interested in next steps with Zage.
Yes. Please. We have a number of great resources. This demo that I gave, there's a much better demo as well on our site. It can be accessed, and you can take a look at it at any time. And there's a white paper that's available for on Universal Zero Trust access. It can be accessed through this link here. That'll dive into more details, and can be a great reference for how to start on your zero trust access journey.
All right, excellent. Well, Roman, thank you so much. Great presentation, great demo, and appreciate all the insights here in the Q&A as well. Appreciate the bringing us up to speed on Zage.
Yeah, thank you all. Thank you, Scott. Thanks for having me.
All right, and we have one more piece of business today, and that is the prize drawing. And so the winner of the $250 Amazon gift card is Savannah Thorne from Massachusetts. So congratulations to Savannah Thorne. We'll be in touch to get you your card. And with that, on behalf of the Actual Tech Media team, I want to thank Zage Security for making this event possible. And thanks as always for attending and for all of your great questions. That's going to conclude today's event. Have a fantastic rest of your day.